something
word
great.
of mouth marketing is the most powerful marketing on the planet. Like hands down, full stop. Best.
Yeah.
If you can get to that level,
There's no denying that. Yeah. Every stat shows, the impact. And, I think, audiences or users are becoming more and more astute that, again, there's paid, there's fake reviews, influencers getting paid to do stuff. Like it's hard to find authentic stuff. So like go to your inner circle. Like that's the surefire way, and you might not trust the same friend for movies as you would for food. Maybe your one friend's a great foodie.
Or for books.
Yeah. Or for books. But like we probably know the people that we trust in each of the different categories that you might want to recommend. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm Jarie Bolander, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Ethos Podcast. This podcast is all about how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world through educating and inspiring the next generation of entrepreneur through powerful storytelling. Let's get started. Eric Colbert, not Colbert, Colbert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I love the fact that sometimes you may call up a restaurant and go, yeah, it's Colbert. Oh my God, are you related to Steve?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, kind of a funny offshoot of that is my mom, who was in real estate for, I don't know, almost 30 years down in San Diego. And even though we always pronounced it Colbert, when she got into real estate, she always liked to pronounce it Colbert. And she felt like it was a little bit more of like a unique pronunciation, and also would ask people, well, how do you spell that? So she thought it would be more memorable. And so like my mom, funny enough, like in business, she'd always say Colbert. And yeah, since Steven's come onto the scene, I get way more Colberts and Colberts out of people's mouths for the first go, but I answer to both. So
that's great. Well, you're the co-founder of VouchVault and a partner and COO over at Spark 6.
Yeah.
Which we're going to talk a lot about and kind of understand your journey through that to there and all points in between. But before we dig into that, as I always like to say, I'm a simple guy. I've got one question. Tell us how you got to do what you're doing today.
Oh, it was super easy, and very straightforward. I drew it out when I was 8 years old. I had the blueprint and then I just followed it. So, I mean, this could be a pretty short episode because it's going to be boring.
I think so.
No, I think like a lot of people, all sorts of twists and turns, and, the journey has been one that I could never have predicted. So yeah, we can jump in wherever you want. But I think for me, my entrepreneurial journey started just after college. So I went to UCLA, loved it there. I studied psychology and anthropology. I was really into the discipline of evolutionary psychology. So kind of understanding modern behaviors from an evolutionary perspective just really jived with me. A lot of things just made a lot of sense from that perspective. Everything from why we have such high levels of infidelity, because maybe we're not a monogamous species, that we were evolved in, or why do we have like so much challenges around obesity, because food is readily available. So I just loved kind of understanding that and how you can apply it to modern behavior and hopefully help people. So anyways, did that. And then in my final year of schooling, I got really, really involved in music and fell in love with kind of the punk rock scene that was coming up. Well, not coming up, but it was certainly, growing at that time. We're in the late 90s, early 2000s. And to my parents' chagrin, I graduated from UCLA with Latin honors. And then I went to go work at Tower Records because I had formed a band and I needed flexibility and I loved being around music. And
Tower Records. I remember Tower Records.
I know.
Man, wow.
So I do think of my band as my very first venture because
What was the name of it? What was the name of your band?
Yeah, called the Irks, ERKS.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the original members are initials. So E for Eric. There was a guy, Robbie with the R. We had a drummer named Chris, his name started with a K. And then we had a female bass player named Sarah. So that was the Irks.
It's a good name, actually.
Not too bad, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So I took that, and we did very seriously, from making sure you're at rehearsal on time to, making sure you're practicing and doing everything that you need to do. And like a lot of bands, we had a few lineup changes, but we eventually won our way onto, at the time, which was a huge tour called the Vans Warped Tour.
Oh yeah. I remember Vans. Yeah. Warped Tour.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a side stage called Ernie Ball. Ernie Ball makes guitars and guitar strings. And every year they would have a battle of the bands. And, submit your, I think at the time a CD, submit whatever recording you have. And, they would choose 3 or 4 bands, at each stop along the tour. And so we were LA based. And so at that time, the tour was in Pomona, and there were thousands of bands that submitted, being, at LA, and we got chosen, which was really exciting. So
how cool is that?
Yeah. So we played, our one date, and we brought a bunch of our fans, and, we really made a big deal of it. And the founder of the tour, his name's Kevin Lyman. He was like, "Hey, I heard about you guys. That was pretty cool. If you guys want to tag along for, another date or two, feel free." He was very loose and just super supportive of all bands, shapes, and sizes. I mean, he was a huge advocate. So we weren't prepared for anything more than that, but we did, we went on to the next day. I think it was in Ventura, and, played another day or two. And then we were asked to come back for like the full tour the next year, and then the year after that. And so, we were growing up, as a band, and, had an RV, did the whole thing. And it was really an amazing time, getting to rub elbows with like legit musicians. We were always a baby band in my eyes. Oh yeah. We got to see, at the time, bands like My Chemical Romance or Fall Out Boy, they were just playing side stages, and they were drawing big crowds there, but they weren't even like on main stage. And just to see kind of, 20 years later, the stardom that they've achieved, and well-deserved, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
So
the other day I was watching YouTube, and there was Lollapalooza in like Brazil or Rio or something.
Yeah.
And like Limp Bizkit comes on, playing their set. And I'm just like, I remember when those guys popped, right? That was 90s, maybe late 90s, I think. Or maybe even, I don't remember the dates, but it was just like this crazy, like, oh my God. Like,
yeah,
they're still around, I mean, Fred Durst has got a gray beard, like old man beard, and, Wes Borland's all, in his wacky costumes and stuff, still playing the same stuff. But gosh, what was like the craziest thing at the tour? Like, how I can't imagine, like, what's some crazy thing that happened?
I mean, so
other than getting picked, that's
yeah. I mean, it was just to see people in their element, and just the dedication. And yes, people partied, and there was some of the, what you might expect behind the scenes, but this was just like, there was such camaraderie, this type of a tour. And I can't really compare it to others since I haven't been on any, but like it was a lot of work, and it took a lot out of you. I mean, you're going from city to city every day. Sometimes you're driving 200-300 miles. And because we were a baby band and poor, like we drove ourselves. We didn't have like, a roadie crew and stuff like that. So it was just really cool, because it didn't matter if you were a headliner or, again, a smaller band like us. Everyone just was like super welcoming. And, one day we got called into the big leagues. So like in Washington, D.C., of all places, again, we're a tiny band. People don't know who we are except, in our local area, really. And we see our name. So every morning they would put up the bands, and what stages and what times you're playing on this huge inflatable. And we see our name on the main stage. We're like, not even like one of the side stages, which was bigger than the stage we were on. It was the main stage. What the hell? And like several other bands that are like way more famous and popular than us, they don't play that stage. And they were just, instead of being like bitter, they were just like, holy shit, like the Irks, like you guys deserve it, go do it. So like, we only did it that one date, but it was just like, you just felt kind of the love, even though we're all not really competing for each other, or with each other. But yeah, it was really just a really cool experience. So.
Did you guys ever do an album or anything?
Yeah. So we released an album. It's available like on Spotify, just
really?
Like,
no,
really,
I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah. It's punk, all, the Green Day or Blink 182,
Yeah.
who were just, grew up in my hometown, in San Diego, where I'm from originally. So I got to see them. Yeah. We fall right into that kind of category, MX, PX, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Cause what's interesting. I've interviewed musicians, a bunch of them, shockingly, musicians and filmmakers, for whatever reason, are more drawn to entrepreneurship. And I think it's because they just understand the gig nature of it. And they're like, you got to go promote yourself. It's like you're your own little thing.
Yep.
And I've always find it fascinating that, it's like, how do I put it? Like that's a moment in time where everything came together, right? You worked hard.
Yeah.
It came together. You got your shot. You did the shot. And then for whatever reason, now you're running a company, but like few people in the world can say I was on the Vans Warped Tour.
Yeah. No,
And I headlined in DC. That
yeah.
is the
There
coolest
you go.
thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was an amazing run, an amazing experience, and it still lives on pennies at a time. So one of our, as a musician, like you look for every way to make money, and licensing is obviously another way, whether it's for TV or film. And one of our songs was picked for, at the time, a pretty popular show called CSI Miami.
Yeah.
They have the whole, CSI, franchise, but we were picked, one of our songs was like the background music of, one of the shows. And like to this day, I'll get royalties for like, $8 when it gets played in, Norway or whatnot. So it's fun, just to kind of know that it's still doing, its thing. And I can only imagine if like what some of these other bands that have really good licensing deals, like I'm sure it adds up, because this was just one show, tiny little background spot, but it still buys me a cup of coffee once a year,
It's like being an author too. Like, I write books, and I always tell people, they're like, why you write so many books? I was like, well, I just love writing books. It's just like, for whatever reason, I'm just drawn to it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll never get rich off writing books. But the thing that's always cool is that, I get the royalties in the mail, or like, Amazon. I use Kindle Direct Publishing a lot. And I'm just always amazed. Like,
that's
every
so cool.
time it's like 50 cents.
Yeah.
$2.25. They're little ebooks, right? And I have other books too, but the feeling is so good.
Totally. I know. Nice reminders. So yeah. So out of music, if we want to kind of continue on, so I got a taste, right? We didn't make it to the big leagues. I would say we were AAA, if you will. And I enjoyed it and took it to a place, as you kind of said, like a lot of bands don't get to that spot. And we did. And it was really a wonderful experience. And then, I always did, part of my joke earlier about a roadmap. I did want to be a dad. I love, I've always loved kids and wanted to be a young dad and all that. And so I actually, in the second year of the tour, got married. Actually, I had met my wife at the time at UCLA. And so she was on tour with us. And so we got married during one of the tours, and we wanted to start a family, and being on the road. And, it's not an easy lifestyle. It's really not for everybody. And I'm a homebody, I really I like my routine. I like sleeping in my bed, so I hung up the guitar, kind of professionally, after our final tour. I think it was 2003, something like that, and decided I wanted to go back to school. And, I really loved academia, and I loved research, and being a professor was kind of what I wanted to do. So went back to school to work on my master's and started a master's program in psychology. And then I was like looking at, how long it takes, a professor to make any money, really. It really comes down to economics. We had just started a family, so we had a baby, and I'm like, oh man, it's like a long ways away before I could actually make a decent income. I'm living in Southern California. My wife at the time was a stay-at-home mom, so it's like single income. And I'm like, wow, that's not really easy to do. And so I completed my first year, and I loved it. Great professors, and I was doing really well. And while I was in school full time, I also had about 4 jobs, just to kind of keep it all going. I was a research assistant. I was a teacher's assistant. I drove limousines at night. I worked with an autistic child who had like behavioral therapy. And then I actually had a full-time job where I was at a CD and DVD place, where when people actually used those, where it was a replicator. And so I was doing all those 5 things and then going to school full-time.
Wow.
So there's a lot on my plate, and I knew something had to give. And so I had that really, really tough day where I had to talk to my professor and say, hey, I got to put this on pause. I got to pay the bills. And it was really, really hard. And I didn't realize at the time how much those professors care and put into you. I think I was kind of nonchalant, it was a small program, but I'm like, they're not going to care. And they cared, because I forget they invest in you, especially if you're doing research for them. I was like, man. So I did, I had that conversation and kind of put my studies on hold and really focused on my job, kind of got rid of the other jobs and was working, as a project manager, and then a little bit of business development for that CD and DVD manufacturer. And so I was like, okay. And I was starting making money. I was like, holy cow, that's kind of cool. First money I've ever really made. And then kind of felt like I outgrew maybe that place, and I did get poached by another company. which was based out of New Jersey. And they were like just a huge sales organization, and their sales guys, and I mean that only guys, like girls were on the inside. And I don't know if this would fly anymore, but yeah, it was literally like they'd get young guns like myself at the time. We were independent contractors. Okay. So 1099. And so all of a sudden, like I'm my own small business, and they would let you sell kind of anything. Now their background was in print and packaging, and everything from corrugated boxes to, plastic, clamshells, like, packaging was their deal. They've been around at that time for about 70 years, but they realized that, if I could find a buyer for X and if I could find a manufacturer that could make X, and I could find a margin in the middle, they would just bankroll it. And so I literally was doing stuff from like skateboards to signs to vodka bottles. I mean, like whatever. And I found myself, flying overseas. I had a pretty big potential deal on the table, actually 4 skateboards, and the company didn't really have much of any infrastructure in China, and because you're independent contractors, and it was just kind of a weird deal. And so I flew to China by myself. I had a friend who had lived in Taiwan and introduced me to, a translator. And I said, I need to find some skateboard factories. And so I did. I was like up in Ningbo, and I was looking at the conditions, and these skateboards were supposed to be sold like in major retail chains here in the US. I'm like, I was still pretty green, but I'm like, there's a lot that could go wrong here. And so I'm like, I need boots on the ground if this is going to be successful. And so through actually a family friend, I had known about another company that was at the time into promotional products. And so they were started in sororities and fraternities, but they branched off. And so they made tchotchkes, lanyards, mugs, all sorts of just promotional items.
Yeah.
And they had offices in China. And so I started talking to them. I said, hey, I know your promotional products. I got like some retail potential products. What do you think? And so what we decided is we formed a subsidiary. So they were kind of their own parent company. I took another hot shot from my packaging company that was killing it, and he and I formed a subsidiary that was also owned partly by the parent company. And I'll say that's my first like legit company. So that's
right.
What I did. And we ran this, global sourcing and manufacturing company for about 8 years, offices in China, Brazil, India. And yeah, we made everything from skateboards to LED signs for Rockstar and Monster and all sorts of, companies. Yeah. I learned a lot. It's kind of the back end of like so many different companies.
Right. Especially physical products, like
nowadays, it's super fascinating.
SaaS and blah, blah, blah. And me and my buddy Ravi were working on a new book called Story Driven Smart Products.
Okay.
And he has got a great line in there. It's like, when you're dealing with atoms, it's like a different vibe.
Yeah.
Rather than like electrons,
No, totally.
Because SaaS, in my opinion, software is pretty much saturated. Like you could do a lot, but like, what's the next big thing? And I think it's smart products. I think it's building things again, which we've lost here in the US to a certain degree. But wow. So cut your teeth on manufacturing.
Yeah. And so I learned how glass is blown and made in molds, plastic injection molding for plastics. I knew about cut and sew for apparel. And it was really a great time. And then there was kind of a strategic reason that the parent company wanted to basically acquire us and absorb, our entity. And so we allowed that to happen. So we were acquired. And then I was now working kind of for this parent company, which just wasn't my jam anymore. Once you get that taste of just being your own boss and freedom.
Yeah, freedom.
And so I rode that out for a little bit, but I knew my days were going to be kind of numbered there. And so, did that for a little while and then really started kind of poking around what I wanted to do next. And at that time, Spark 6 was about 3 years old, and they were UX and UI and engineering, which I knew nothing about, but I knew one of the co-founders through kind of a networking group that we used to get together, and just we had a good mutual respect and friendship. And so when I was just, talking to people about, hey, I'm probably going to be bailing here, just keep your eyes and ears peeled. They're like, well, we could use kind of someone to help with operations and just strategic business development, all sorts of stuff. I'm like, well, we could take a chance on each other. And the plan was for me to kind of come in as a third partner after I kind of prove myself and make sure that it's a good fit. And so made the leap, jumped over there. And then not like a month or two in, one of the other co-founders was just like, you know what? I'm not loving agency life. I want to go maybe start a family and go back home and, just kind of get out of it. And so I ended up just buying him out through an earn out, which maybe your audience would be interested in learning. So like, using the company's profit. So I didn't have to come out of, my own pocket.
Not out of pocket.
Yeah. So ended up buying him out. And other than like a quick hiatus from the other co-founder who was working for a project just for a hot minute from a VC, it's been me and him running, Spark 6 for the better part of the last decade together.
Wow.
And we're still in our lane of like designing and building digital products. So we build mobile apps and web apps. We're very strong in e-commerce. We do SaaS platforms like you mentioned, and we just do custom software. So we got UX and UI designers and engineers and, just to name drop a little bit, but we worked with eBay and PayPal and Cisco, and we work with the Getty Foundation. We work with Bill and Melinda Gates. We love stuff that has a positive impact. Not everything we do is saving the whales, so to speak, but
I used to say, I could do anything. I try what I want to build another bro app.
Yeah, for sure. So we find ourselves a lot in like the health and wellness space, just because that what me and my partner at the agency are very mindful of. And so, we do a lot in health tech and fit tech, education. And then sometimes we just can't help ourselves and we build our own products. And so,
which I think leads us to VouchVault.
That's a good segue. Exactly. And so VouchVault was incubated, inside the agency. It's been since spun out. It's its own Delaware corporation. We've raised funds against it. And, it started in my head and my problem that I always had around recommendations. And so I'm a list person. I don't know if you are, but you might be. And before I had VouchVault, I had a list, several lists, list of books that I wanted to read, list of movies that I planned on watching or TV shows or documentaries, list of restaurants that people said I had to try, recipes to make. I mean, I could go on and on. So
the list is endless.
And I realized I'm not unique in that. And I started asking, well, what do you do? Like when you actually get a recommendation or hear about something that you do want to try, not something that you don't care about, but like when someone says, hey, you're going to love that documentary, and you're like, shoot, I better, make sure I watch that at some point. I just heard everything from like, I email myself. I have, Evernote or Apple Notes. I have a spreadsheet. I think I'm going to remember, it just, no one came to me with like, or I didn't ever discover a great solution to something that I think a lot of us have. So that was like my main problem. I wanted a repository, a place where I could easily keep track of and organize, the recommendations that I get throughout my day or hear about. And so I bring that to my business partner and he's like, yeah, I have the same problem for sure. He's like, but that's just a utility. And it's like, it can be hard to build a business just around a pure software utility. Although I love it. He's like, my problem, and this is him speaking, my problem is that like when I get into any new like activity, whether it's jujitsu or mountain biking, there's all these products and services and just like a whole industry around it that, when you're new to it, you don't know anything about.
No.
And so like, if you want to go do research, good luck. I mean, there's, opinions about everything, but what he was like, I just want to talk to my friend who's been, a black belt in jujitsu for, 10 years. And when he tells me that's the tackling dummy I should get, or this is the meaning regimen or diet he's on, like, I just want to get it from people that I know and trust, not from strangers.
Oh yeah. Totally.
So we kind of combined, which were very interrelated, this whole like review space, which is inherently flawed. I think a lot of us can really recognize that there's paid and fake reviews and that taste is subjective. And that'll bring me to our other co-founder in a moment. But like, so we just kind of mashed our two challenges that we were facing together into VouchVault. And so it's a social utility that allows you to easily keep track of and share and discover recommendations from your inner circle. And so you don't need to rely on strangers on Yelp or people on Rotten Tomatoes that just might not like R-rated comedies and get their opinions, And so that's what we built. And then, I was going to mention our third co-founder in VouchVault. His name is Jay Chandrasekhar, and he's a writer, director, producer, actor that is most famous for his films Super Troopers. It's kind of his big.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a great film. Yeah. I was so happy when they actually raised money, I think through some sort of
they did it in Indiegogo.
That get what?
Yeah.
Indiegogo. Right.
Yeah.
He had a buddy that worked at Indiegogo, turned me on to it. And oh man, talk about like the particular genius of that is
Oh, totally.
like, I mean, tell him from me, like wonderful, like inspiring, just the amount of great. I just love
Yeah.
that.
No,
Great.
it's his whole group called Broken Lizard. They're just,
Yes,
they're amazing.
they're like the kind of, because again, I write mostly nonfiction. Well, almost all of it's nonfiction, but I just so appreciate the creative spark.
Yeah.
To like get your crew together and like the zany, wacky. Yeah. It's like it must be what it feels like. I think this is the case. At least when I was when I was on all of my startups, it was a feeling of like the crew.
Yeah.
This is the crew.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
you just click, 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 click. And
It's infectious. It's like a beautiful thing when it comes together.
It's like a good team. It's like a really good team. It's just like you're infectious is the best word. You're so inspired to like excel. You're so inspired to be just excellent. Is the only way I can think. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah,
pushing each
great.
other. Yeah.
So
we were introduced to Jay through a mutual, friend acquaintance, and his origin story is really fun, and he's gotten to tell that story on a few podcasts, and I'll try and do justice to it, but it actually takes us back to Super Troopers. They debuted at Sundance, like 20 some years ago, and it was really a smash hit, amongst the audience. We jokingly say they were probably high and drunk, but either way, like the reception from the audience was like really fantastic. And they ended up selling the picture to a studio. And then I guess, they have to do reshoots, and they finally come out like maybe a year later. And Rotten Tomatoes, as we know, has the critic score and then the audience score. And critics almost invariably get first looks at stuff. So they got a hold of Super Troopers and they just blasted it. It was not well received by the critics, like 36% fresh rating. And Jay and his crew were like, understandably devastated. They're like, what? I mean, you should have been at Sundance. Like, this was a huge hit. Yeah. And so it went on, as you know, to be a cult classic, audience score well past 90. But it really got him thinking, whether it's your artistic expression, in a movie or a book or whatever, music, that obviously taste is subjective. There is a place for critics, but he was always just like, when was the last time you went up to a stranger and asked them what you should watch? Because like, you just don't know if you have the same sense of humor or if you like the same kinds of movies. Yeah. And so, he's been jokingly saying, I've been plotting my revenge against Rotten Tomatoes for 20 years. For 2 decades, I want to take them down. And it's true. We do. We want to take them down.
That's a pretty strong drive.
Yeah. And we want to take down
it's like
Yelp for the same reason of this. Like,
I mean, even in the B2B SaaS stuff, you got G2, you got Trustpilot that could be gamed. And there's some, to your point, there is some value to it if it's above boards and not gameable. Now, the one thing about G2 that I like is that it'll say, this is a, compensated review. I mean, you can tell, but like, this is the thing that I think is the economic drive versus the personal drive or whatever. And to your point about critics versus like the audience, I was listening to Quentin Tarantino on Two Bears, One Cave when he was talking about his book, Cinema Speculation, which fantastic book, by the way. Love.
You vouch for it?
100%. Like it's a great book. Audiobook is good too, because he does the intro and then the
I'll add that to my VouchVault.
Yeah. It's A+. In fact, I literally just posted on LinkedIn today about like how interesting it is. And he was talking about his childhood or whatever. But the thing about critics versus, he's talking about Pulp Fiction and, Tom Segura's interviewing him. He's like, how did you get Bruce Willis? Right? Like Bruce Willis at the time, was the top 3 in the world star. He tells that story, but that's not the story that's interesting. The interesting story is John Travolta. He's like, what did you know about John Travolta that no one else, everyone's has been washed up? And he's like, no, we'd go to, we'd walk down La Cienega or whatever in LA. We'd go to a restaurant and people would go nuts over John. They just love John Travolta. And I'm like, why is this guy not a star? Yeah. And he's like, well, I can do something about that. Boom, most iconic, probably one of John Travolta's most iconic roles. I mean, even Bruce Willis, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And he's talking about how, to your point, right? It's it's what's the true fan, the true authentic voice of a fan, and what is really what you like, or like, and again, critics, things can be gamed, but like getting that true audience. And I think for startup, it's all about finding those fans, finding like how you resonate, right?
Yeah.
Which is the most powerful thing. And he just is like, no, I think John Travolta's awesome.
Yeah.
He's playing, I mean, Bruce Willis wanted to play Jules. He's like, no, you're Butch. It's like, and you just sit there and go, wow.
Yeah.
Like in the room when it happened. Wow. That's great. So VouchVault is more about bringing it to the people, like the true fans.
It's we're doing this organically almost every day. If you're having coffee or a beer with your buddy and you're like, oh, did you check out that podcast or that book you just literally recommended right now? Like, I'm going to add that because I know we only recently met, but you're saying how good it is. Like, I don't want to miss out on that. And I love Quentin Tarantino. So we're
fantastic.
Yeah. So we're doing this already. We just wanted to build a product that made it, and kind of unbeknownst to us, we built this like really powerful word of mouth product. Like we were solving our own challenges, but for brands to want to like have their, advocates, their brand ambassadors, just like talk about it and share, with their inner circle what they're doing anyway. So we productized it, kind of unbeknownst to us.
Yeah.
So it's been
word
great.
of mouth marketing is the most powerful marketing on the planet. Like hands down, full stop. Best. Yeah. If you can get to that level,
there's no denying that. Yeah. Every stat shows, the impact. And I think, audiences or users are becoming more and more astute that, again, there's paid, there's fake reviews, influencers getting paid to do stuff. Like it's hard to find authentic stuff. So like go to your inner circle. Like that's the surefire way, and you might not trust the same friend for movies as you would for food. Maybe your one friend's a great foodie.
Or for books.
Yeah. Or for books. But like we probably know the people that we trust in each of the different categories that you might want to recommend. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, back to your jujitsu point. So I'm a purple belt in jujitsu. So I can resonate with the, what to get or whatever. But I think the other thing that's really interesting about that is if you travel and you want to go to a jujitsu studio or academy or whatever, it's hit and miss, because some, depending on your belt level and the attitude of the academy, is a different vibe. Like the vibe, you could just feel like there was, again, like I'm at Bay Jiu-Jitsu in San Francisco, and we had a black belt come in from Stockton, and like black belt walks into a studio, like there's a respect, there's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But it was funny because, I do a 6 a.m. class. We're just like a bunch of older guys because, want to get up early or whatever. And so we're all a little bit on the older side. So this guy comes in and, cool guy. And of course you want to like, how good is he? You're a black belt. Like you should like, and we're rolling with him, and, we got our black belt, my professor, and we're doing stuff. And it's funny because, you can feel these a little tense. I'm like, what? Like, we're cool. We're all cool guys. Like, we're not like, you could tell, like we're, middle-aged men, for lack of a better word. And then it was funny because towards the end, he's just like, you never know about these academies, some of them you got like a target on your back because you're a black belt. And he's like, you guys are just really cool. Just like, I go, look, I would tell him like, look, man, we just all want to learn, and we're in it because we love the sport and we love to be inclusive. So to your point, it's like, if you're going to go to a town and like want to get to a jiu-jitsu club and you don't know anyone, it's like, you're definitely going to want someone to recommend, this is a good studio.
Yeah. That's exactly what you're looking for. Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Interesting. So how long's VouchVault been around for?
We've been around, in a public capacity for about 18 months. We've crossed over 11,500, users, and almost at 19,000 vouchers, because it's all user generated stuff. So it's like, we're showing some nice signs of retention, and we're still trying to figure out who we want to really focus on. We did very much a shotgun approach, just because it can be used by everybody. But I'm sure you're smart enough in marketing that you can't market to everybody. So we're really trying to do some good research and strategy about like, what is the small slice that we really want to focus on. And we've been leaning pretty hard into parents with the millennial mom kind of rising to the cream of the crop of parents have really desperate needs for trusted recommendations, and mom are social, and every stage there's a whole new chunk of things that you need to, supply your kid with or have restaurants. So we're pretty bullish on the parent thing. I think we just need an overall strategy to kind of shore that up. But we have all sorts of folks on the platform, from gamers and fans of Jay to, my crew's on there. It's just like, it's a mixed bag, but I think as we continue to grow and focus, we want to pick a lane for now and then have it expand.
Yeah. Cause I mean, one of the things, so like I have a fiance now, has a daughter, and there's something in the Bay Area called Bay Area Mothers Group.
Oh, sure.
For any mom is like a godsend. Like it's a pretty strong, powerful
it is
group. I don't know how many thousands, probably upwards of 10,000 mothers are in it.
Oh my goodness. That's huge.
Yeah, it's crazy. You should definitely look at obviously mothers groups are big, actually demo, but there's a newsletter and everything they pay for it. And I just remember, talking to Minerva, my fiance, about it. And there's definitely a difference between a mother and a father. So it's like these fathers are like, oh, we should be an auxiliary to this mother's group and whatever. But notoriously, and this is just a complete stereotype that I am absolutely going to own, not as organized as moms.
Yeah.
I like orders of magnitude. Right? And so they're like, well, just going to like kind of coast, on the coattails of this group that built like amazing stuff. And, they've got like, you can donate your stroller, or like, there's marketplace. There's all sorts of interesting dynamics to it. And of course, since it's the Bay Area, it's a lot of tech focused too. So that's probably a good one. It's also the other thing that was interesting is like, there's a friend of mine named Sam Parr. I don't know if you know who Sam Parr is.
Of course. He's a friend of yours?
Yeah. He used to be here in the Bay Area. He moved to Austin. But when he first started the Hustle, I went to all his events, HustleCon and everything. And, I would be like, hey, I'm here. I'd love to chat with you about stuff. And we'd chat. I mean, we're acquaintances. I mean, I've been to his office a bunch of times. So I'm not saying we're like super, but it was just super cool to see his evolution. And he created this thing called Sam's List. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have.
Sam's List is about accountants. Here's the accountants we recommend. So it's super interesting that you're right. I think you're at the point in culture and in time where people are sick of the gaming of this stuff.
Yep.
And they really want like authentic, as an example, like I would love to find a really good family attorney to help me sort out my trust and everything. I don't even know where to start. Like
I got one.
Love and recommend. Yeah. I do. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's great because I have to do that. Like, going to become a stepfather and I got to sort that out. Same with accountants, like the professional services. So
how about a plumber?
Idea.
How about a plumber?
Yeah.
Or having a good plumber is like invaluable, or a good car mechanic, right? Or if you're going to be a good contractor for your house. I mean, I hear, you go on Next, you hear the horror stories of like this contract, there is a need, and
huge.
Yeah.
Huge need. So it's just fascinating. The timing's interesting too, because we're all habituated to looking at reviews and asking friends. And even in B2B, as an example, like just if you're just looking to sell the B2B, and I'm not saying you do this, but just as an example, then now, since everything's so saturated, performance marketing is basically done and dusted. It's all about the founder brand. It's all about the trust. It's basically back to first principles. Hey, Eric, what do you think of? Or, hey, I'm looking for blah. Has anyone got a good recommendation? Amplifying that and making that authentic and real and useful. Yeah, I think that's the future.
I do too. Well, it's funny. So Sam's my first million, right? Yeah. And so him and Sean. Yeah. They were literally talking. It was like a month ago. They did a podcast where they were talking about, they did have their, I think they call them drunk nights or something, where they kind of just riff on ideas. Yeah. And Sean brought up one that he had talked about, I don't know how many months ago. And it was about another Facebook group. And it wasn't the one that you were talking about, but this woman had formed this group around moms, and they just, tens of thousands, I think. And her following on Instagram is, massive. And Sean's like, this is the best. If someone wants to go do this, this is going to be like a massive opportunity. And we tried, my business partner's actually in Hampton, and, they have a lot of, they have a lot of rules about
in Hampton,
reaching out. And so we've been very careful, but Like we literally built exactly what they had been talking about on their show. So,
I mean,
yeah,
I shoot your shot, man.
Yeah.
I will say, like, it's just funny because, like, I knew him. I mean, again, we don't talk much now because he's in Austin, but I mean, like back when he was building the Hustle and HustleCon,
such a cool story.
Early on,
Yeah.
like really early on before he sold to HubSpot, and which is funny. My impression of him, it's always like he's just a huge experimenter. Like he will just like have these ideas. He has another product called Copy This or Copy That, basically a little email course on how to be a better writer, and it's funny because I always tell myself anything he does, I'm just going to buy because I want to get in early because I was into trends early, like all these things. Cause it's like, for whatever reason, he's just like got the edge. Like he just sort of, not that he can predict the future, but he's got enough scale to sort of almost make the future or see a trend that's interesting, and he'll experiment all the way. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he was telling me he was doing this one business where they're writing romance novels. It's like, oh, this romance novel thing's a big deal. And I'm like, yeah, that's like the biggest genre in books. And he'd done it and said, I'm not interested. But like creating romance novels is a massive business. Like it's shocking, but it's porn for women. But it's funny because you get those trends and you just sort of, who knows, like even in entrepreneur, like who knows what's going to hit.
Yeah.
But usually keep that bats, eventually you're going to hit something. So
Totally.
super cool. Yeah. If he's in Hampton, you should definitely shoot your shot, man.
Yeah.
Especially since you've built something that's like, hey, we built what you wanted. Here it is.
They literally talked about it for about an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and he's true because I think Sean's a father too. And so of course he's got that insight. I remember one time, this was back when it was Twitter, not X. I follow him. I took one of Sean's classes. His power writing class.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. Like how to write better or whatever. And the best Sean thing was he was going to Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there's this Instagram feed of like hot dads at Disneyland. He's like, I want to be on this thing. I don't know if he ever did it.
Yeah.
Or he ever got on, but I just thought it was like the funniest thing.
It's
like,
aspiring to do that. See, always goals.
Hey man,
Always goals.
Goals are there. So, wow. So, Eric, I appreciate your time, man. This has been really fascinating. And I think your journey is just so, unique, but also fascinating, the zigs and zags onto where you are today. And I really appreciate your time. And
it's my
I'll
pleasure.
go check out VouchVault for sure.
Yeah.
Sounds
Well,
like a
I
really
appreciate you having me on here. I really do.
Yeah.
Love what you're doing. And if this resonates with anybody in any way, shape, or form, then we did our job. So
yeah. If you get to know us a little bit better and you could feel inspired, and you're going to go check out VouchVault for sure.
Yeah,
I am going to go do that because I love these lists. I have lots of people that love lists. And
I can't wait to see what you come up with on yours. I already got your book one, but so for sure.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Entrepreneur Ethos Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it. My hope is that you learned something that can make you a little bit better. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do share it with friends and review it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also join my email list by visiting theentrepreneurethos.com to get my thoughts on what I'm doing to get better, as well as what I'm working on. You can also pick up my book, The Entrepreneur Ethos, if you want to learn the traits, values, and beliefs that I think we need to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient entrepreneur and, frankly, world community. Feel free to follow me on Twitter @TheDailyMBA and let me know if you have any questions or recommendations for a guest you'd like me to talk to. Also, drop me a note if you try anything we talked about on this or any other episode. I'd love to hear what's working for you. Until next time, keep getting better.